What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel and now welcome back. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed unless, of course, your taste level is lacking because it's never me. What is up, y'all? I feel like I have not shown y'all the locks in so long, and can y'all believe it has been a year? It was a year, March 1st. That year came and went so quickly. I can barely believe that it's been that long, and I love my babies, even though I haven't shown them. Well, I haven't shown them on camera because the wigs that y'all see me wear, when I tell you I snatch them off after filming, and I mean I like them too, but you know, in the real world, when you see me out and about, typically you see these locks. However, with the amount of money I done spent on wigs, baby, them wigs getting worn. Okay, somewhere, somehow. Y'all, let me let y'all know, y'all niece has been trying it lately. She really has. She's been having a little attitude. I don't even know why I'm telling y'all this because y'all always take her side. Y'all always make excuses for her behavior. And while she is being quiet because she is asleep right down here on the floor, I'm gonna go ahead and get into the topic for today's video, which is the case of Arpana Jinaga. And if you are unfamiliar with her, she is a young lady who hosted a Halloween party that turned deadly mysteriously. So without further delay, I'm gonna go ahead and get right into the details. Now, she is born the eldest of two sisters. Her father is a professor of computer engineering and her mother is a housewife. She grows up in, I believe it's pronounced Hyderabad. It is one of India's largest cities. Now, she and her sister's childhoods were rather normal. Their parents really encouraged their passions for art, gymnastics, and other things of that nature, but their parents really did not play about their schoolwork and encourages them to always prioritize academics. By the time Arpana had reached her teen years, she had already become somewhat of a tech prodigy. She participates as a teen in a hardware design contest that gets the attention of several universities, and both she and her sister opt to follow in their father's footsteps, pursuing a career in computer engineering. By the age of 21, Arpana had become incredibly proficient in embedded systems. She enters into yet another design contest, this one for a microchip, and although she does not win, she again earns herself a lot of notoriety, landing in the top 20 amongst thousands of contestants. She is featured in a publication, The New Indian Express, which highlights young inventors. She attends and graduates from a top university over in India, and afterwards she decides that she wants a change of scenery. She moves to the US and furthers her education at Rutgers University over in New Jersey, where she receives her master's degree in December of 2007. Now, instead of returning to India, she decides she wants to stay in the US. She is liking it over here in the trenches. She accepts a position as a software quality assurance engineer over at EMC, and she really excels within the company. Within 6 months of joining the team, Arana has proven herself to be a huge asset to this tech giant, and by her 7th month at the company, she had been promoted to lead programmer and was very highly regarded by the higher ups at the company. Everybody with the title knows Arpana and knows her for her works. At the top of 2008, she gets herself an apartment in Redmond, Washington, which is on the outskirts of Seattle. And this area is supposedly known for its tech industry presence. Her apartment is on the top floor of the building, which is the 3rd floor. And because she has no family there, no friends, she familiarizes herself with a lot of her neighbors. She is not a shy girl. She has a nice, upbeat, outgoing personality. And a lot of the people who come into contact with her, whether it be through being her neighbor or working with her, they really like Arpana. She is a very sweet girl. Additionally, she purchases herself a motorcycle, and the now 24-year-old joins a motorcycle club called the Pacific Northwest Riders. In her free time, she also volunteers at the Redmond Fire Department as well as an animal shelter. So she is very involved in the community. By all accounts, Arpana has really settled in and has curated a life for herself that feeds all of her passions. By 2008, Arpana has made quite a few friendly connections, and she decides that she's gonna host a party for Halloween, which in 2008, Halloween falls on a Friday, which was perfect. That morning at work, she invites several of her co-workers. She's very excited about this little shindig that is taking place. After work, she stops by a party store to pick up decorations and to grab a costume for herself. She transforms her apartment into this haunted forest and transforms herself into Little Red Riding Hood. Now, 3 other residents of the Valley View apartment complex have opened up their apartments for this party. And they have, of course, invited their own friends and family. There is a melting pot of guests that move between all 4 units throughout the night. And at some point during the night, Arpana gets into a very heated disagreement with one of the male guests. Now, according to those who witnessed the exchange, this guy had made a few inappropriate race-related comments that offended her. They were about her being Indian, which she did not appreciate. She let him know, and they had their disagreement, but they quickly moved on from it to enjoy the rest of their evening. At around 9 p.m., Arpana closes the doors to her apartment, okay? That is enough of partying in her unit, and the party is then moved and spread across the other 3 units. At around 3 a.m., the party begins to die down. It narrows down to just one person's apartment down on the first floor. And around this time, Arpana decides, you know what, it's 3 a.m. Mama done had enough. She heads up to her apartment to call it a night. Now, between the hours of 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., a neighbor on the side of her hears what sounds to them as moaning and a little sexual exchange taking place over in her unit. And the following morning around 8 a.m., the same neighbor, Cameron Johnson, aka CJ, is awakened by what he describes as this horrible groaning sound that goes on for about 20 seconds. Then he hears a loud thud, which he assumed was Arpana falling out of her bed, and then after that he hears water running for about an hour. Now it all sounds to him like she was waking up from a hangover and then she had proceeded to take a shower. All very normal sounds, and although these noises had waken him up out of his sleep, he was not upset about it and he doesn't think much of it. He just writes it off as the consequence of community living and sharing walls with your neighbors. Now, although Arpana has not been home to visit her family in nearly 2 years since she's moved to the US, she keeps in regular contact with them. She speaks to them on the phone every other day. No more than 2 days will go by without someone hearing from her. However, Friday had gone by, all of Saturday, and now Sunday without her contacting them or them being able to reach her by phone. And then Monday rolls around and she does not show up for work, which is very unlike her. They too attempt to reach out to her by phone and nothing. By this time, her family members have called, have texted her, and have not gotten a response, so they are extremely worried. And her father knows of a former student of his that lives in the area, so he reaches out to him, Jay, to have him go by and check on Arpana. Now, Jay arrives to the apartment complex at around 9 a.m. on Monday. When he gets up to the 3rd floor, he runs into the neighbor Cameron, who is out in the hallway, and together they proceed to go to Arpana's door. Now, at first glance, you can't tell anything is wrong, right? But as soon as they go to touch the door, they realize that it was slightly open and the door frame was broken. It was as if somebody had forced their way in but had carefully pulled up the door on their way out. Her apartment is very quiet. The living room is a mess, and not from the party itself. It was very obvious that some sort of struggle had taken place in the living room. And there's also this very overwhelming aroma of bleach and chemicals. The 2 men proceed to go to the bedroom, and there they find Arpana lying naked on her bedroom floor down near the foot of her bed. And it is very apparent that she had been there for days. Jay immediately dials 911, and the 2 men rush out of the apartment to wait on police out in the hallway. And when investigators arrive, they are completely baffled by the scene. Whomever had done this has spent a substantial amount of time inside of her unit after the fact, attempting to clean up and destroy evidence. Now, Arpana herself, she was laying face down. She had been beaten. She had also been strangled and doused with motor oil, as if someone had attempted to set her on fire, not knowing that motor oil is not flammable. And the smell of this bleach is from the person wiping down a lot of the furniture inside of the bedroom, furniture inside of the living room. Bleach had also been poured on the carpet. Her white comforter is blood soaked and also soaking in the bathtub that is filled with a mixture of bleach and water. And once they conduct a search, they find inside of the apartment building dumpster a plastic bag that has blood-stained sheets, parts of her Halloween costume, costume, and an empty container of motorcycle oil. Missing from her apartment are her ID, her cell phone, and an expensive digital camera. None of these items have ever been recovered and are believed to have been taken to help conceal the person's identity because maybe she had taken photos of them at the party and had possibly made or exchanged phone calls and text messages with this person. When her remains are examined, it is discovered that she had passed from asphyxiation, but she had suffered blunt force trauma and had several broken teeth. Her own underwear had been used to gag her, and duct tape had been placed over her mouth to keep it in place. She had also been sexually assaulted. And after all of this, the person had scrubbed her body down with bleach and water before the oil was applied. And her fingernails have been very heavily and roughly scrubbed with toilet bowl cleaner, which of course ruins any bit of DNA that may have been underneath them. Now, the exact time that all this had taken place cannot be definitively determined. However, the medical examiner estimates it to have been between 3 and 8 a.m. Saturday morning after the Halloween party. While interviewing the neighbors, they found out about these noises and the disagreement that she had had with one of the guests. None of the neighbors believed that this guy that she had been arguing with was responsible for this. They all said that the argument was not that serious and was over quickly. It wasn't so bad that he would have crept up there and done this to her. And when this neighbor Cameron is telling them about the noises that he heard coming from her unit, he says that he is sure that the sounds were from consensual relations. And this is the same neighbor Cameron that was out in the hall when Jay had come by to check on Arpana. Now, unfortunately, because she had hosted a party that night, there are a ton of people's DNA all throughout that apartment living room, and they don't have any additional evidence to zero in on any one of them as a potential suspect. With that, the case goes cold for nearly 2 years. Then, in October of 2010, a press conference is held to announce the arrest of a suspect. 27-year-old Emmanuel Fair had been charged for the death of Arpana. Photos of him at her party had surfaced, and local law enforcement were very familiar with him. He had a very lengthy rap sheet that includes firearms, illegal substances, and the SA of a 15-year-old girl at gunpoint. To that, he had pled guilty and had spent 3 years in prison. He was only sentenced to 4 before being paroled for good behavior, and he had spent the last 2 years sleeping on friends' couches in between short stints in and out of jail for his parole violations. Halloween of 2008, not only had he attended the party, he was currently staying with a woman, Leslie, who was a tenant at that apartment complex. And he was also seen engaging with Arpana that night. Prosecutors revealed that they had found his DNA on the duct tape, the items found in the dumpster, and on Arpana's neck, as well as all around her apartment, including inside of her bedroom. Now, he does not deny being at the party at all. He does not deny having a conversation with Arpana. He said that it lasted about 30 minutes, but the brief conversation, that was it. He was just one of many people who had had a conversation with her that night. They never spoke after that. He never saw her after that. He also says that he left to end his night well before Arpana had ended hers. He had gone back to Leslie's apartment and was in bed by 1 a.m. But according to his cell phone records, he had made several phone calls between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. proving that he was not asleep like he claimed to be. And one of these calls were made to Leslie. So if you're staying at Leslie's apartment and you're currently there at Leslie's apartment, why are you calling Leslie, sir? Emmanuel is charged for her murder and he maintains his innocence. He enters a non-guilty plea while the prosecution seeks a life sentence for the first-degree murder charge. His defense team calls out the prosecutors for racially profiling him, and also they challenge the prosecutors' DNA evidence. It had been tested using a software program called, I believe it's pronounced True, instead of an actual crime lab, and this software had never even been used in Washington before. They do have the DNA run through an actual crime lab, and the probability that he was a match according to the crime lab's results is significantly lower. When I say significantly lower than this software's findings, it was like 56 or something million off. And this software is a proprietary software. It's privately owned. The prosecutors have the results with no understanding of how it actually works to determine its results. And when the defense team asked to look through the source code to try to find that out, the company that owns it refuses to provide it, and they refuse to explain how the results are calculated and produced. And the reason is they say they don't want to give competitors the opportunity to copy and steal their formula. This back and forth between the prosecutor and the defense over this DNA software system situation causes a huge delay in the trial. Meanwhile, Emmanuel remains behind bars. And when I say huge delay, 6 whole years go by before his trial starts in February of 2017. Unfortunately for him, he did not have the money to post bail, so he was just forced to sit in jail, child, and wait on his trial to start. And during his trial, prosecutors lay out the series of events that they believe had taken place the night of the Halloween party. They believe that after she had finished partying for the night and had gone back to her apartment, she was followed by Emmanuel Fair, who proceeded to kick her door in. He had attacked her in the living room, had finished her in the bedroom, and had then cleaned up the crime scene. And they also believe that Emmanuel had an accomplice, Arpana's neighbor Cameron Johnson, who had helped discover her. And even though they have given him a role in this crime, he is not charged. At the party, these two men have been seen together, listening to music outside in a car and very possibly plotting on Arpana, according to the prosecution. Now, they'd actually been looking at the neighbor as a suspect prior to even having Emmanuel come up on their radar. The night of this party, that neighbor has shown up very intoxicated and had admitted during his interview with investigators that he had romantic feelings for Arpana and had hoped to hook up with her. Those was his words, literally. Had hoped to hook up with her that evening, but nothing had transpired between the two of them that evening, and it is not clear whether or not she reciprocated that interest in him. He had also told investigators that he left the party around midnight to go to bed for the evening, and his cell phone records were pulled and showed that that was a lie. He had called Arpana twice that evening, once at 2:56 a.m. and again at 3:02 a.m., right around the time that she would have returned to her apartment unit, which was right next door to his. And it's likely that he would have heard her come in. Now, initially, when they asked him about phone calls made to Arpana, he denied them, but when shown the proof via his call log, he admits to making them and says he just at first didn't recall. His DNA had also been found inside of her bedroom, on the bottle of motor oil that was found in the dumpster, as well as throughout the apartment. And very strangely, that Saturday, he had tried to cross the Canadian border, but was denied access into Canada because he did not have a passport. He had also printed maps for local pawn shops, and since Arpana's cell phone and her camera were missing, this led investigators to believe that he had potentially attempted to pawn them that day. Now, after failing to cross the border, he had gone to another party later on that same Saturday, and he had shown up to that party with a nasty little limp, indicating that he had been in some kind of physical struggle recently. Even knowing all of this about the neighbor, he is still offered immunity for simply agreeing to be interviewed, which is why he was never charged with anything. Emmanuel's defense team argues that the neighbor is just as likely to have committed this crime, if not more likely based on the evidence, and likely did it all on his own. They accuse the prosecution of just selecting him because he was a black man with a rap sheet instead of this white man, Cameron Johnson, who had all of this evidence suggesting that he had done this to her. Emmanuel's trial lasts for 2 months and ends with a hung jury, 9-3 in favor of an acquittal. But the prosecutors, they are not giving up their pursuit of making Emmanuel pay for this crime. They retry him. He has a second trial in 2019, and this time the jury finds him not guilty. He is fully acquitted acquitted and released to go home finally after spending 9 years in prison for a crime that he did not commit. With this, they go back to the drawing board. The person that she had the fight or the argument with had a rock solid alibi, so it wasn't them. The DNA of another neighbor who actually had not even attended the party that night is found on the bootlace that was used around her neck. But they too had a rock solid alibi somehow and was able to be ruled out as a potential suspect. There were just a bunch of leads to nowhere. And Emmanuel, who has spent 9 years in prison for the crime, goes on to sue the police, accusing them of racism and using unethical and illegal tactics, treating him differently than the neighbor who was white and had just as much, if not more, evidence that supported him being the culprit. He also claims to have been mistreated by the guards and says that the 9 years he spent in prison were mostly in solitary, which is proven to be very damaging to someone's mental health. I searched for the results of the lawsuit online and it doesn't appear that it has been settled yet. As for Arpana's case, it still remains an open and unsolved case till this day. Her body was returned to her family in India. They gave her a proper burial. The motorcycle club over here in the US led a memorial service as well to honor her locally in Redmond, Washington. And that pretty much concludes the case. I wholeheartedly believe it was Cameron Johnson, okay? To give him immunity for an interview is insane. If he had plans to hook up with her that night, he probably attempted to make a pass or a move. She possibly rejected him, and he did like many men do, got upset and took it too far. Let me know what your thoughts are down below on this case. Like the video if you have not, subscribe to the channel if you have not. As always, I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace. I hope you guys have been having an what's today? March. Y'all, let me know. No, that's not what I was gonna say. I need to let you know. When I tell y'all this Rare Beauty primer is the best, I love it. Arpana is born, I don't like the way it looks. And she decides to move to the US. She enrolls into Rutgers University because she wants to further her career. Not career, girl. She ain't even got a career yet. Education. She moves to the US and she furthers her career. Not career, you did it again. And is highly regarded. Additionally, she poaches, girl. By October of 2000, bro, why I say two like that? Ugh. That morning she goes to work. She informs or invites, girl, and they have a course of what narrows down to just one person's apartment complex. No, whomever had done this to her has been a not potential, substantial, girl, substantial. And when Cameron, the neighbor, she yells to announce this before being probationed. What? Paroled, girl. Paroled. Arpana's neighbor, Cameron Johnson. Or was it Jackson? Let me see what that man's name is before I go on. The bootlace that was used around her neck, another DNA. The party, their DNA. Okay, what? I can't talk.